Rack and Roll, Shadows of Centris, Koa's Conundrums. Marisa's eyes brighten as the large figure of Koa steps through the doorway. "It's so good to see you, honey. I'll be over in a minute. I'm nearly done with my current customer." "That's all right. I understand if you want to take a minute," Mrs. Softfunk says as Marisa returns to brushing out the final little touches in her mane. "Oh no, no. You paid up front, and that means I'm not done here until the job is done. As tasty as my husband is, I still have professional standards." She chides her customer as she works teasing out flowing spirals that would catch in the wind exactly as the customer ordered. "Oh, and how tasty is he?" the enormous blue and gray Canador asks, and Marisa giggles. Now, Mrs. Sawfang, it's rude to kiss and tell, although there is a great deal of kissing involved. After he cleans his mouth, he's a human, so he's fond of foods that would make even your mouth burn. Hawaiian I may be, but the Cajuns really know how to cook, Koa remarks from where he's leaning against the wall, not too far away, but thoroughly out of the way. When he can resist putting in enough salt to shrivel my lips or the chemical weapons he considers a garnish, it's really good. But there's just so much of it. I've gone up both in both cup size and a hip size. Marisa compliments and her customer starts chuckling somewhat at the idea. "Oh my goodness, so he's a chef, is he? Right out of the, what do you humans call it? A mess hall?" "That's one of the names, yes. But I'm not a cook, I just like to cook," Koa corrects as he simply watches his tallest wife work. That he has to make that definition and is not considered a pig is still somewhat amusing to him. Unlike that cretin Amadi or Reggie and his bucket full of issues, Koa wanted to slowly take in how aliens did things and actually understand without skipping the first 50 steps. Of course, the curious case of Herbert would make the argument that the first step is to have as many brides as possible and try to juggle that mess. The fact that there are entire swaths of the galaxy which have that kind of union as law would support that Herbert was both more and less normal than most. He watches as Marisa finishes using the long-toothed comb to finish curling the long strands of hair, occasionally pausing to use what looks like a butter knife to renew the layer of gel on it, all to style the long flowing tresses of the Canador into a huge series of bouncy drill shapes. Something that he would swear would take industrial strength curlers, and more than a little bit of raw bullshit is finished right in front of him. All the while, Marisa is waxing long about his cooking and how there's always so much, and she just feels guilty not eating as much as she can manage whenever he cooks. "You know you're allowed to tell me I made too much," Koa remarks in an amused tone. "I won't be offended. Humans like myself have extra organs and denser muscles and bones. We need all that nutrition to keep ourselves going," Koa remarks, and it's very true. The average human adult, if living a fairly sedentary lifestyle, uses up about 1,200 calories a day in basic biological upkeep. A Tret, half that. "The sisters eat more than me in their metak," Marisa says, and there's an amused snort from Mrs. Sawfong. "They also have physical jobs and are heavily pregnant. You've got one in the oven and they've both got at least two. Also, you get to sit down a bit more often than the girls," Koa remarks. "So if you're not a cook, then what do you do for your people?" Mrs. Sawfang asks. "I'm just a boots-on-the-ground soldier. Training-wise, at least. I'm one of the integrators, as the slang's been going around. My more unofficial job is to get used to the galaxy and get the galaxy used to us so we can better fit in as part of it. You know, figure out all the little missteps and make the first mistake so that they don't become a bad habit," Koa explains as Marisa gets to the last little bundle of Mrs. Sawfang's mane. "Oh? Anything really interesting?" I hear daily exclamations that Centris is insane, and the story of how I met Marisa required me to show up in person to confirm that I wasn't just playing a prank on someone, Koa remarks, and Marisa giggles at the idea of something so simple and mundane as a bachelor barn being unusual. "Oh, tell me, tell me, tell me." Nothing exciting. I got a call from the bachelor barn and went for an interview. It took 3 minutes, and I had my first taste of my husband, Marisa says with a somewhat scolding look towards Koa for playing it up. For you, it's not exciting. There were several betting pools on the Dauntless that I completely shattered with that report. We had guesses every which way as to how matchups were done, and the problem is that it seemed that our every guess was right. So how do you pay out a bet when every possible outcome is a winner? Koa asks, as Marisa finishes up with Mrs. Sawfong. There you are, ma'am. A deep wash and styling, Marisa says as she presses a foot pedal and the chair with the enormous Canador slowly rises up. The chair straightens up and the enormous super predator rises up and stretches. Oh, thank you, little lady. Sometimes you just need to spoil yourself, you know? Mrs. Sawfong asks before finally getting a look at Koa that isn't out of the corner of her eye. I think I've seen you before. I have made public appearances, yes. Ah, the charity ball. You were in the band that the humans brought in when the other performers lost their nerve. I'm the opening singer for Bass and Brass, Koa says, dropping his voice to a more singing tone that makes his already velvety tone darken into something that curls Marisa's tail and puts a dopey smile on her face. I thought that was the case. You boys really set imaginations on fire that night. Clean-cut, sexy men, and when the danger drops in, you pull out powerful weapons out of nowhere and make a joke out of your enemies, Mrs. Sawfong says before thinking. So, I have several granddaughters at the age where they start looking into boys pretty hard. I'm here to spend time with my wife, Koa remarks and gets a smile that has a forest of serrated teeth. I know, so loving and affectionate. I know many of my girls that could use a taste of that. I got lucky with their father, but I don't think I'll have an easy time finding a cute little Canador boy for them all, Mrs. Sawfong remarks, and Marisa looks conflicted as Koa gives the massive lion shark woman an even look. All right, look, lady, I haven't been out in the galaxy long, but for the love of God, it's got to be crass as all hell to try and muscle in on someone else's marriage for the sake of your granddaughters, Koa says, and Mrs. Sawfong's eyebrows go up. Oh? It's a marriage. You talk to my wives as well as me, Koa says, and Mrs. Sawfong slowly turns to Marisa. Well? She asks slowly, and Koa steps between them. Do not intimidate my wife, he says slowly, and the Canador leans down to look him in the eyes, prompting him to roll his shoulders to get them nice and loose for if he has to take this to a physical level. Oh, and what do you think you can do about it? She asks as Marisa backs away and rushes into the back. The entire salon was partially paying attention before, but now no one's even pretending to be looking anywhere else. What I need to, Koa remarks as he mentally gets ready to fight and kill the woman if he has to. You need to leave. Now, thank you for your custom. Now please leave, Marisa says, emerging from the back with what looks like a large boxy gun that Koa can't identify. Oh, feisty. It looks like I found the right group, but perhaps not the right time, Mrs. Sawfong says, standing up fully and backing away from Koa. He smiles at Marisa, who keeps the weapon on Mrs. Sawfong until she leaves, still smiling and then walking away. She then lowers the gun with a sigh of relief. Hey, you did great, Koa says, hugging her gently and kissing her on the cheek. What is this anyways? If it was plasma, she would have laughed. It's a shard launcher. Very primitive, but it uses magnetic to hurl sharp metal shards fast enough to cause them to superheat in the air, Marisa says softly. A wonderful toy, he says as she lets him take it, and he makes a point of not letting it point at anyone. Are you all right? I'm not a fighter, she says, taking a breath. I'm a businesswoman and a stylist. It's okay, Koa says, holding her close. He kisses her on the forehead and she leans into him. This is wrong. I'm supposed to help keep you safe, but you stepped between me and a Canador. A Canador. I'm also armed, armored, and battle-trained. We brought you into this not because of fighting skill, but because of a powerful mind with a clear view. And sometimes a mind like that lets you know where you're lacking, and that can hurt. But having the presence of mind to know your failings is part of this. If everyone's a fighter, then no one gets nice things because we're all too busy bonking each other on the head and taking what the other person has, Koa says, and she leans into him for support that he gladly gives. Come on, let's put this thing away so we can get down to what I came for. And what's that? She asks, standing up a little straighter. There's a park a few spires away that I've been wondering about, and a walk through nature is better with one of your wives by your side, Koa says, giving her another peck on the cheek. There's a cheer from the salon. Go on, boss. We've got an hour until our next scheduled appointment, and you need a bit to unwind after something like that. We can cover the walk-ins easy, her receptionist scheduler says from her spot going over the schedule for the day. Well, come on. I want to spend time with you, and you seem to have a gap in your day. Let's be together and let the worries of that unfortunately pushy Canador slide, Koa says gently. But she could be waiting outside. If she wants her life cut short, that's on her. You scaring her out and getting her to back off saved her, because if she kept pushing, I would have drawn my own weapon. So you are armed? She asks, and there's a flicker, and Koa has another weapon in his left hand as he holds her shard launcher in the right. Always. Trained to use it too, so we're safe, he says before tucking away his sidearm again. By the way, where's the safety on this thing? Oh, it's the little lever there, I think. All right, now let's get this put away and get rid of some of that stress my showing up brought. Oh, it's not your fault. You categorically would not have had that conflict if I didn't show up. Therefore, it's my pleasure, my duty to ensure that you are well and truly relaxed after that. Your pleasure? Let's see. A beautiful woman by my side in a public park where we can duck out of sight to really, well, not in front of the others, Koa says, and he pulls her into the back. Koa, that's just, I put the stress in you, so I'm going to take it out. That sounded better in my head. That sounded much better in my head, Koa says after closing the door behind them. Marisa can't help but smile at the goofy flub, and he shrugs and sets the gun down on a side table. But really, are you all right? Even among more violent races, not everyone's comfortable with what just happened. Are you okay? She pulls him into a deep kiss and gets a proper taste of him. And that taste is an obscene number of pheromones that kicks her emotional axis right into the horny zone, and the slight taste of the mouthwash he's been using to keep the taste of his preferred food well and truly away from her and the others, because he's considerate that way.